Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes, the podcast where we give our immediate reactions to the hottest board games just minutes after playing them. My name's Tim.
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
And today we're going to give our hot take review on the game we just finished playing, Scythe. But before we get into that, we do have some poll results to cover every week on social media, on Twitter, and on our Facebook group. I ask a poll question, and you have a chance to respond and get your voice heard. But we'll also read some listeners' comments. The question I asked this week, do you avoid trying certain board games because of your experience with that designer's other games? And the options I gave, number one was I don't pay attention, and we got a 21% on that. Yes was 40%, and no was 39%. So pretty even between yes or no as far as whether people, will avoid games based on the designer's past games. How do you guys answer this?
I said yes, and I had one very specific designer in mind when I said yes to that question. And ironically, the game that we were supposed to play tonight originally was a game by this designer, but just for logistical reasons, we were unable to actually get that game played. And the designer is, for anybody who's listened to the show before, probably would not be shocked, it's Reiner Knizia. There's a lot of stuff about Reiner Knizia games that I generally just don't enjoy playing. I think there's some oddities about the scoring and the end game and certain other aspects in the lack of thematicness to Reiner Knizia games that, despite their obvious popularity and obvious excellence in the board gaming world, just really don't hit for me. And so I generally avoid them, which is why it's funny that today, originally, we were thinking of doing a review of Quest for El Dorado, which seems very un-Reiner Knizia-like in my opinion. And so I actually did want to play quite a bit. But generally, I would avoid a designer whose games I had tried and really found that they had continuing or repeated functions, mechanisms, or other characteristics that I really did not like. And the same would be true for a designer that I really do like, I would seek out actively.
I actually asked this question, Chris, because of you, because I've got a bone to pick with you. So
you always have a bone to pick with me, Tim. What's new?
So we're planning out SedonaCon, which is our fourth biannual in-person get-together. And if any listeners are not aware of this, about twice a year, we all get together in person, rent an Airbnb, and just play games that entire weekend, kind of our own little mini con that we're doing. And so we're getting together in Sedona, Arizona in about a week and a half now. And I sent a list of all the games that I was planning to bring with, the ones that I wanted to get played. But I said, hey, we got too many games here. We're not going to get them all played. If there's something you want to veto, let me know. And Chris picked two off this list, two games that I don't think he even has any idea how they play. But I also don't think he has a strong opinion of the designers. One was Ra by Reiner Knizia. And then the other one was Architects of the West Kingdom by Shem Phillips. And so, Chris, I'm curious, do you think you have an idea of how those games play? Did you choose not to play those because of what they are? Or did you specifically opt out because of the designers?
I specifically opted out in the case of Ra because, and I guess, yes, the truth is I don't know anything in depth about the mechanisms of those games. I think I've heard you talk about Ra before, and it sounded to me like pretty standard Reiner Knizia fare, which very much Quest for El Dorado was not. I've also now played two of the Shem Phillips. What are the two we played? We played Wayfarers.
You played Wayfarers, and you played Viscounts of the West Kingdoms as well.
And Viscounts, yeah. Both of which kind of left me flat. And so I didn't pick that one. But just to be fair to myself here, I am not that much of a curmudgeon. There's no game out there that I won't play. I mean, all these games have some fun involved in them. I'm not to say that, any game, I hate this game, I hate it. It's not like that. It's that of all the games, I saw the list of the games that you had, and a ton of them are great games. Why would I take a game that I'm already kind of predisposed, or that I know there's things about it I don't love? There's so many great options. Why would I pick a game that I don't think I'm going to like?
No, similar question for you, Adam, because you opted out of a game that was on my list, but by a designer that I actually thought you liked. So why did you? I assume that wasn't related to the designer, right?
Yeah, you're talking about Taiwansuyu.
Taiwansuyu, yeah.
Taiwansuyu by David Turtzi.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in his designs for sure, but I've heard this game is, maybe from you, Tim, it's super complex, so it's a hard rules teach. And we're going to be at this SedonaCon playing, 10 games a day or whatever it is. And I don't know, maybe I'm just getting old and lazy, but I can really appreciate these games. You pop out on the table, have the light rules overhead, and you get them going. You don't need to have all these things, all these, who's the guy that does On Mars?
Lacerda.
Vital Lacerda. You don't need to have these things that ties in with this and ties in with this and unless it's like something that strikes the perfect chord for you and is just a magnificent opus that you want to go back to over and over again and learn all these systems and learn how this thing ties into this thing and gives you the one bonus you need to do this other action, and then it lets you twist this thing on your player board to get the escape car to move the rover to get the gem. It's not worth it to me. Right, exactly. It's just not worth it to me. So I don't want to spend so much brain energy and time learning a game where you're going to do a great job of explaining it, Tim, I'm sure, but none of it's going to make sense to me until 3/4 of the way through. And then I'll be like, man, why did we waste so much time playing this game? So that was my bone to pick with Tawatan. How do you say it, Tim?
Tawatan Suyu.
Tawatan Suyu. But as far as the poll question goes, I think all designers have hits and misses, and I'd be willing to take a stab at any game that any designer puts out, or any new game that a designer puts out, even if I've had a bad experience with that designer in the past. So of course it's going to bias my future decisions. Chris, you're not missing much with Raw. I played it before and it was okay.
Get out of here.
But I'm looking forward to trying it again. I've only tried it the once, and this guy was so enthusiastic. Oh, look at this! This thing happened. I'm like, I don't understand what happened. I just lost. So I'm looking forward to play it again, and maybe it'll be fun. But yeah, so of course my opinions are going to get tainted. If I'm really excited about a game from a designer I've been keeping an eye on, and then the game falls flat, then I'm going to be like, So I'll be a little more reluctant or a little more enthused depending on, my past experiences. But there's nothing that I'm going to shut down completely.
Yeah, well, I'm curious to hear what Tim has to say about this, because clearly there was an insinuation in this that we're suckers. So what's the real answer here, Tim?
This is a very biased poll question here, Tim.
No. The only insinuation was that you're not playing the games that I want to play. That's my only complaint about it. I completely understand that, actually, and I was thinking this. I thought really hard about this because my answer was no. I can't think of a single designer that I would see a game put on the table and say I'm absolutely not going to play it. Now I have concerns about Vital Lacerda because my only play of Vital Lacerda was On Mars. And I thought it took too long to learn for what I got out of that game. Mm-hmm. But there's a couple other Lacerda designs I'd really like to try. And so I'm definitely not saying no to him yet. Maybe after another 2, if they don't hit, maybe I would. I kind of feel like every single board game designer I've ever played a game by, they have hits and they have misses. I haven't found 100% hit rate on any designer, and I haven't found 100% miss rate on any designer, at least any that I've played more than one game of at this point. So I'm not comfortable to say, no, I'm not going to play that. I'm not even interested in that yet. If somebody's enthusiastic about a game, or the mechanisms sound cool, or the theme sounds cool, I'll probably give it a try and, hopefully be surprised. I definitely feel like board game designs can be very to your taste. And so like every designer, as long as they're not doing the same game every time. I mean, like Uwe Rosenberg's a great example. He does a lot of the same mechanisms in his games, but some games just hit so hard for me, like Agricola, and then others fall pretty flat for me, like A Feast for Odin did, right? Even though it's almost the same mechanisms going through there. So I feel like I would give any game a try regardless of the designer's name at this point. Maybe that'll change at some point in the future. Here's how some people answered. And there was a lot of kind of generic, like, no, generally I don't care. Yeah, it's, yes, this matters. But I picked a few answers that highlighted a couple specific designers because I thought that was more interesting. So Joe said, I tried not to judge based on one game. I played Above and Below and felt really underwhelmed by it and ended up selling it. Also didn't like Now or Never. Had I given up on Ryan, I never would have discovered Sleeping Gods, which is now one of my favorite games. So a great example of somebody still, sticking with the designer and then eventually discovering something great. Andrew said, yep, no more Lacerda for me. I can play them, but just feel like they're getting more and more complicated for complicated's sake. Respect the designer, but I'm good. Thanks. Derek said, I hate to say this, but I disliked Aquasphere so much I have avoided all other Stefan Feld games, even though I love Castles of Burgundy. That's really interesting because Feld has so many designs, and Castles of Burgundy, you love that one game and then, opt out after one other one. But I can see that. I've got a couple of Felds I'm going to try to introduce you guys to in Sedona next week. Let's see if one of these, I think these are going to be the best possible hits for you. And if you don't like them, then you probably should say no to Felds in the future as well.
I think I'm very close to saying no to all Felds.
I think you'll like these two. I promise. I think you like them.
I don't think I have a strong bias on Feld one way or the other. I played, what's the one you love? Castles of Burgundy.
Castles of Burgundy.
I thought it was decent.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's going to be some that are going to be okay for it, except the production and the theme is going to fail so hard for you, Chris. You might opt out no matter what.
That's a possibility.
All right. And the last answer, Scott said, Grant Rodiak, the designer of Cry Havoc, took a shot at Red Sox fans, and I joked with him that I was canceling my pre-order. He said, I'm okay with that. So screw him and all his games.
Nice.
Designers, don't be so flippant with your backers. You might lose a permit. Maybe you don't care. Anyway, yeah, all right, cool. Well, that will wrap up the conversation on that topic. And Chris, may you rot in hell for not playing some of my favorite games at SedonaCon.
Yikes.
Yeah, I had that coming.
No, just kidding. That was way too aggressive.
That's appropriate, Tim. That's appropriate.
Let's jump into a description of Scythe.
In Scythe, 1 to 5 players lead factions attempting to assert their dominance in Central Europe in an alternate history of the early 20th century. In the world of Scythe, Nikola Tesla has led an unprecedented boom in technology, and as we all know, humans, when given a new technology, will find ways to kill each other with it. As a result, the conflicts in Europe are now populated not only by troops, tanks, and other conventional munitions, but by towering mechs that dominate the battlefield. Set in this dark alternative past, Scythe is a hybrid of both resource management and area control, with the action taking place primarily on a stylized, hex-based map of Europe. Players will move about the board with their main character, their mechs, and their workers. This will allow them to set up production stations where their workers can harvest steel, grain, wood, and oil, as well as recruit new workers. Players can also seize other players' territories through a simple combat mechanism. While all of this intriguing conflict is playing out on the map, much of the deep thinking, planning, and resource management occurs on the individual players' boards. Each board has 4 action spaces that include a top-level option that's easily accessible. It allows for basic actions like movement and production, and a bottom-level action that usually requires more planning and resources, but also provides big benefits, like constructing mechs, building valuable buildings, and taking enlistment actions that can provide powerful bonuses. There's also the ability to take an upgrade action that makes top-level actions more beneficial and the bottom-level actions less expensive. Finally, players will be tracking other important statistics like popularity, a significant point multiplier, combat power, and completed goals, which can range from maxing out the aforementioned statistics to winning battles to building all of a player's available mechs or buildings. Once a player has achieved 6 goals, the game ends immediately and points will be tallied for cash on hand, completed goals, controlled territories, and leftover resources. The player with the most points will be the winner. Scythe was designed by Jamie Stegmaier and is published by Stonemaier Games.
All right, welcome back. So we played a game of Scythe tonight, and for once, none of this was a first play for any of us. We've all played Scythe quite a bit. Yeah, like dozens of times for me, probably Chris also. I know Adam's played a few times with us as well. So this is one we've had a lot of experience with in the past. And went back to it tonight. I always wanted to cover this one on the show. So interested to talk about it and hear your guys' thoughts. Let's jump into the gameplay and mechanisms.
So first, before getting into any actual gameplay or mechanisms, I'm just going to say this is a game that I have loved and yet have a huge vendetta against because for whatever reason, I refuse to actually understand the scoring on it. And so this is the second time we played this game as a group where I thought I was just dominating hard, only to come in last at the end of the game. So it's so sad. It's so sad. I feel like I have a lover who slaps me every time that I see them. It's horrible. Anyway, so much fun here. The thing that really stands out to me as just being so fun in this game is the player boards that control your actions that you take and the upgrades that you do and what things cost. Basically, there's a bunch of little tokens that block off spaces at the top, which are where you get benefits, and can be moved from the top down to the bottom, where they essentially reduce the cost of things that you might do throughout the rest of the game. So you have all these things that cost you resources, like building mechs or doing an upgrade or doing an enlist action or all these other things. So as you're moving around the board and you're producing and you're getting resources, you are taking these actions that let you develop these technologies and do these various bottom row actions, and you're getting the benefit for each turn of whatever is at the top. And I like the flow of that. I mean, I know it's not that unique, that kind of open up new opportunities for production and the upgrades. But the way it's done in Scythe, I think, is just so streamlined. And it's the kind of game where when you start rolling with it and you get a flow going, it just feels like you're on top of the world, because you get in this cycle of, now I'm going to do this action, and then you got to move to the next space and you got to take the next action. But now I'm ready for the next action. I come back and I'm ready to move back to the original space I was at. And it feels so good all the way up until the end of the game, when you realize that all the points were in dollars anyway. So other than that, it's such a good feeling mechanism. And I like the smoothness with which it operates.
What I wanted to talk about today was the area control of this. This is a Euro game through and through: engine building, resource management, point gathering, Euro game. But there's an area control element to it. One of the ways you're going to get points is by spreading out over this map, and for territories you control, you're going to get points for it. And I think Scythe does it in such an interesting way. For one, this just doesn't come up in Euro games very often. And there's so much tension in the conflict, in the area control, and the combat here. It's so risky. The way that it works with this power dial, where you can only spend up to 7 of your power, but once you've spent it, you've lost it. It's so risky to go to combat because it just sets you up to be just beat down. And I would say in this game, probably more than any other game of Scythe I played, I felt like that hidden card that you play with your power really did matter. I knew you guys were going to bluff me, like every single one of those combats, but I didn't want to take the chance. So I went all in and I just gave up everything. I could have beat Chris on the first combat where he attacked me because he didn't go all in. But I was like, nah, just in case he does, I'm not going to waste all my power. But I could have won that one. And then when I went against Adam, he bet nothing, and I could have just saved all my power for Chris's next combat. This was a game where sometimes that bugs me, and we've talked about that, actually, I think, in our least favorite combat mechanisms, where sometimes it feels dry, but tonight it was impactful. But the area control is interesting here, right? Like, controlling that factory in the middle is 3 territories worth. So that's a special kind of king of the hill thing. You're fighting over that. The whole time Chris was sitting in there, every time I was about to take it from him, he'd move somebody else in there. I couldn't get to it. But spreading out, how you spread out, how you can move in and take somebody else's resources from them if they're not well protected is pretty crazy here. How if you move in and knock out a worker out of a space, you lose popularity, which is one of the scoring multipliers. I think there's a lot of fun decisions here. And I think it's really fun that you can kind of play this game, just go for the engine building points, but you can also play this game just trying to spread out on the map and get the most points that way. Yeah, I don't know. Every time I play this game, I'm always like, that's one of the fun factors to weigh in of every turn. Do I take a move action just to spread out, or do I do something else? And I like it inside.
Yeah, so you guys are both touching on in-game scoring a little bit. Chris, because he has no idea what's going on in in-game scoring, and Tim, you're talking about the varied ways to get points in that in-game scoring. One of those is the area control. Another one is the number of stars, number of objectives you complete in the course of this game. And then there's I don't know what that card is, Tim, where it's the building bonus, structure bonus.
Yeah, structure bonus.
Structure bonus. And then the other way to get points is the number of resources your little guys have walking around with them. So if you wanted to, you could just make a ton of resources. And then there's a multiplier by the popularity of your faction. So you're working up this popularity thing, to get a little bit of additive, multiplicative bonus at the time that the game ends. And it ends abruptly. As soon as that 6th star gets out there, the game is over. So here, Chris foolishly decided to go to combat with Tim and crushed him. And that got him the 3rd place finish. Had there been one more turn, it would have been, I think Tim still would have pulled it out. I would have been able to take a move action. I would have been able to spread out all across the board and got a few more hex bonuses. I would have gotten able to accomplish my personal goal, which would have been another star up there. So a few more points there. So it's interesting, I think, at how abruptly this game can end. That star mechanism, I think it's 6 stars. Whoever gets their 6th star out there ends the game. So I think that's pretty unique. There's not much quite like that. I don't know, there's a bunch of stuff like that, but this variation of it, I think, is pretty interesting.
Man, if only I'd held off for that one more turn so that you could have accomplished your personal goals and I could have taken a deep 3rd instead of a close 3rd. Man, what was I thinking?
I know.
As you're talking through the area control part of it, one of the things that I find interesting is how area control and the actual possession of resources is affected by that. Because in most games, you get a resource and you stick it on your player mat. And it just sits there until you're ready to use it. And there's really nothing, unless there's some kind of special action that anybody can do about the stuff you've got in your possession. in Scythe, unlike most games, those resources stay out on the board. So you might have an area where you have workers who've generated resources. I think at one point I had something like 5 chunks of metal, 3 barrels of oil, and a couple of wood in one spot. And if you don't have some way to protect that, someone can come and take those resources away from you. They're not on your player board. You actually have to protect those. Now, the sort of counterpoint to that is that if someone comes in and knocks out your workers, who are the ones holding all these resources, nobody likes anybody who kills the little people. So you end up getting negative popularity points, and that's a huge end game effect at the end. But I find that kind of cool because you have to be a little bit more cognizant of how you're or where you're keeping those resources and how you're protecting them. Because there's a couple points where, because of that space I was just talking about, I was like, man, is someone going to find a way to sneak over here and take that from me? That's going to throw everything off. And nobody did, thankfully. But I was concerned about it for a long time.
That's one of the areas where this game, it feels like everything is just so connected because yes, I'll lose popularity if I move in there, but also if I take that space, I might be able to spend them immediately and get that bottom row action on my player board. So you can't even take it back from me.
Right.
And it feels like everything in this game is so interconnected. And I think in a really streamlined way. I mean, we were just whipping around our turns this time. It was like, I'm going to move this here, take this. Okay, you can go ahead and go while I'm picking up my resources. And you can just really move things around until it starts to get meaningful, until it starts to matter what other people are doing. And you can like pause, wait, let me see what you're doing over there. Because I wanted to see if Chris was going to unlock that third movement action to know whether he could move 3 to attack me before I decided what I was going to do. One other mechanism I really love in this game, though, is a little bit of a story that it tells. And there's a story just in all the things we're talking about, moving out across this land, who gets to the factory. But these encounters, when your main character figure moves to a space with these little encounter tokens, you flip over a card off the top of this very big deck. And it shows some of this really cool Jakub Brzezalski art. We'll get into the production on that, of course. And it just gives you 3 options to take. And that's just always fun for me. It's exciting. It's like, I want to be doing that. It only happens usually maybe 6 to 7 times for all the players in the game. Maybe I'll do it twice or 3 times at max. But it's a fun moment in the game. It's a fun moment where a little bit of a story gets told, a little bit of flavor gets added into the game. And so I really enjoy that got added in here. I don't think Euro games do this type of thing well enough, where they just blend a little bit more, a little more story, a little story beat into the game without really slowing down the game at all. I thought Scythe did it really well.
Yeah, Tim, the encounter cards are fantastic. I'm going to square it on back to the combat mechanism here. You got your little battle wheel and your card and the amount of strength you can use. If you're above 7, the most you can use is 7. Is that right? Is it 7 or 6?
It's 7.
Yeah. If you're above 7, the most you can use is 7. And if you're below 7, that's the most you can put on your combat wheel. It's kind of like Dune, if you play Dune. But then that next card you play, it's going to be a card between a value of 0 and 5. So the combat can be pretty determinative. If you know that this guy can only put 4 and he has you assume he has a 5 power card, and then he's only going to be a maximum of 9. So you can just pre-calculate ahead. And that's, it's good and bad, because you can be like, oh, I got this battle in the bag, no problem. So I don't know. Sometimes it could be good or bad. I think it's straightforward. I'll say that for it, but it doesn't have the excitement of like a Blood Rage or some of the crazy stuff that could happen in Dune, for instance. So it lacks that excitement factor.
Spice. It lacks the spice that Dune has.
Lacks the spice. That's fantastic.
Oh.
But, maybe you want that or maybe you don't want that. For me, the combat is just a little bit mediocre here for me.
I don't know whether to agree or disagree with that, because I think both, actually, because it isn't that exciting a combat mechanism, but it's very functional and it fits in very well with the game. And the fact that sometimes it can be very exciting because you don't know and there's some bluffing, versus the other times when, like you said, Adam, it can be extremely determinative.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 2 battles, in the end, actually ended up mattering not at all, but I was able to completely calculate the maximum Tim could have, and I knew that for both of those battles, I would be able to produce more, combat strength because I knew the cards I had in my hand. And so that was, for me, very comforting. That wasn't very exciting, and it probably wasn't very entertaining for Tim, but it was very functional for me in that moment. And there are other times when, you do have to take more of a chance. It strikes me as pretty multifaceted. But I also wanted to really quickly come back to a comment Tim made about what are they called? The encounter cards. And I think those are one of the single most enjoyable bits of any board game that I have ever played, hands down. They instantly add with one card this huge dose of fun, humor, cool art, and some really powerful mechanisms. Usually they come with something pretty strong. Like you get a pretty strong benefit, or you even get to do something like an enlist action or an upgrade, or something really cool like that otherwise would take a lot of planning to do. You get really cool art because all the art in this game is just terrific. And so you get a little chunk of it there. And then the humor is just, to me, just delightful. There was one card I had where there was a bear on it doing something, and you had three choices. You could either tame the bear and get something, you could start a bear cavalry, or you could make bear sandwiches, and each one had a very different effect. And every time I look at one of those, I just smile, and I am absolutely delighted by it. And I know that's kind of treading a little bit into theme and production, but there's also big benefits to those cards and some really interesting choices to be made as well. And I think that just makes that a grand slam with those cards.
I want to circle really really quickly back to the combat here, and just say that I really, when I'm away from this game, I'm on Team Adam, and I'm like, the combat isn't interesting. But I think there's two important things about this. One, it is a Euro game. It should be deterministic to some extent, or all the planning you're doing doesn't have any value. But two, I think at a higher level, once you played a bit, and when I play it more frequently, I do find that bluffing makes a huge difference. You can completely get away with murder in that game if you bluff somebody outright. But if they call your bluff, you lose big time. So there can be excitement if you don't play it deterministically, if you play it in the way that, that's there for you to play with. And so it can be fun, but also it allows you to still play a Euro game without just throwing caution to the wind and not knowing what could possibly happen for you. So I think it works okay here. I don't disagree. It could use a little bit more excitement, maybe a couple more effects that could come up on some of those combat cards or something like that. But still, I think for what this game is trying to do, which is blend this area control and combat stuff into a Euro game, still pulls it off really, really well.
And some of the expansion factions, Tim, right, there's one that lets you play 2 combat cards, I think, and then your guy had a couple little pluses and minuses going on with his, add 2 to your attack capability power, and then subtract 2 from the guy that you are attack. So there's a couple little things here and there with some of the factions.
Yeah. The mech abilities, almost every faction has at least one mech that you can take off that's going to give you some benefit in combat. It's all visible, of course, but you're talking about one of the factions that's kind of a spoiler. So if you've never played Rise of Fenris and you intend to, just skip the next 30 seconds. But there's a really cool faction in there where it lets you play any number of cards as long as they're the same number. So when you're going against that faction, you don't know what the other person has in their hand. You could be playing against a 4, or you could be playing against 15 points or something like that. So, much more interesting and exciting, I think, once those come into play. Speaking of expansions, I did want to mention too, Chris talked about, I think it was Chris, or no, it was Adam that talked about the end game, how this just ends abruptly. One of you guys did. But, and that can be fun, and it can also be a little bit of a turnoff. And so I think they tried to address that with the Windgambit expansion, which added some airships you can add in there. But one of the things it does is it adds a whole bunch of endgame tiles that kind of change the endgame condition. So they don't all just end when someone gets to 6 stars, but there's several other conditions in there. So personally, I have tried some of them. I think they're fine and interesting, but I'm just fine with the 6-star win condition. But I think that's worth calling out, that there's an easy, official fix if you don't like that race condition, or you don't like the end game just happening abruptly like that. There's some interesting ways to change up the game, and I wouldn't mind playing with those as well.
So we've talked about the mechanisms here, and a bit of controversy with this one. Jacob Rozalski has taken a lot of heat for the art that he's done. Personally, I think the art that he has done and the world that he's created in this board game is absolutely amazing. What he's done, and there's comparisons, right? There's images that he's used similar, components of those images and inserted them into the game. But you look at those images that he took them from, and it's a dude on a horse or something like that with some Ottoman helmet. And I don't care about that. But what he's done is taken this dude on a horse with an Ottoman helmet and inserted him into this landscape with some giant mechs in the background, created this whole atmosphere around this situation. And he's stylized it in such a way that makes a trivial dude on a horse look absolutely fantastic. I don't think this is any different than a musician sampling somebody else's a section of a song, or this happens all the time in art. And what he's done is made some photographs, some old art, some old images more fantastic, more enjoyable, and unified them in such a way that is second to none.
Adam rushing right in with the controversy there.
Why not?
No controversy in my mind. This is just outstanding stuff. I love the production of this game. And I mean every part of the production of this game. Now, I will say that we've played in person when we've played this game. We've done it with upgraded components. And so there is definitely, there's a little bit of a bias there toward the upgraded components, which include realistic, nuggets of plastic that, are in the shape of the different resources you have. And so I think that makes a big difference. But even the base production is so nice. These big plastic mechs, the nice little characters, the sculpts on those, the art that Adam was just talking about. And I think the art really, 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 really is the star of the show, because the world building that comes through in the art for this game is absolutely one of a kind. There's so much personality. There's so much interest. There's so much intrigue in the way that this is drawn that it's generally not this straight full frontal mech. It's a mech looming over the trees in the mist. You know what it makes me think of in a lot of ways? The way you see Cthulhu presented in pictures. And I love that. Adam is probably internally rolling his eyes, even though he's not doing it physically. But, there's kind of a misty giant fading off into the background, and I think that makes this a very moody, very evocative game. And the world that it's a world that I want to spend time in, because it's a neat looking place. It's interesting. It ties together the mechanisms and the theme so nicely. I want to see more in this world. And thankfully, in the near future, which I'm sure we'll mention by the end, that we will be seeing more of this world.
Yeah, the artwork's the superstar here. Now, Chris, you mentioned upgraded components. I've upgraded everything in this game. We played with some pretty extravagant stuff, but the base retail production of this game is fantastic. Even even all of the resources that you're playing with here are unique sculpts on them. The workers are all unique sculpts for every faction you're playing. The artwork is of course amazing. Dual layer player mats for every single faction. This is all out of the box. This is a fantastic production, even if you never upgrade a single bit on it. But there is a lot of official upgraded stuff for this. Of course, there's third-party aftermarket stuff as well, but I have all the official stuff, and it's all still available. That's one of the cool things about what Stonemaier Games does with their productions. They never put anything out that will not be available in retail. So you can order any single one of the upgrades from their store, from one of their partners. Really quickly, going back to the artwork, it's amazing. Jamie Stegmaier built this game around this artwork. Like, he literally saw Jakub Rosalski's work and said, hey, I want to contract with you to make this game. And he made a really awesome game with it. But that's how impressive this artwork is. Now, going back to the controversy, Adam said, like, basically what Jakub Rosalski has said is that he basically used reference work from past artworks. So if there's a herd of pigs walking across, he just said, why would I try to figure out how to draw the anatomy of a pig from scratch? I'll just draw it off of another illustration that was there. I think that's really commonly done. It was very precisely matched. Who knows what tech he used to do this? Did he just copy and paste it and then put a filter on it? That's potentially not positive to use, but he also could have just used it as a reference. So I can't speak to that, but I will say that the artwork's amazing. And it's just a really cool, like, putting these big steampunk mechs into a pastoral setting. I could go on and on about it. I love it. It's the best artwork. It was one of the first games I got introduced to several years, but 5-6 years ago, and there has not been a single game that's beat it from a artwork perspective so far. Beyond that, like I said, the production's great. I love the map. I want to talk about the map really quickly, kind of the main board. The main board is laid out beautifully. There's spaces for cards around it. The graphic design is great. The score tracker is great, where you put all the cards are. But there's this big hex map in the middle. And each of the spaces kind of represents a different type of production they do, and the different, whether it's a tunnel, whether it's the factory. And there's some really clear illustrations so you can tell what everything is. But it's on top of this beautifully illustrated Europa, which is a kind of a generic, like a whole bunch of Central Europe countries. But if you look really closely at this amazing artwork, there's tons of Easter eggs hidden all over the place. I'm not going to call them out, but if you ever get a chance to play this board while you're in between turns, just look really, really closely at the artwork, and you're going to see some really neat stuff here.
Well, here we are again, back in the Mediterranean, farming and gathering resources. No, I'm just kidding. There's nothing pedestrian about this theme at all. Yeah, I'm echoing everything you guys are saying. Fantastic theme, fantastic artwork. The retail, you can get this game retail for under $65, which I think is an amazing deal. And you get just outstanding quality for this game. So yeah, beautiful production theme.
Well, I think we're all in agreement that this is a slam banger of a game in terms of production. But here's the real question. Now that we've each played it like 24 times, would you ask to play it again?
My answer is yes. I still really like the game. It still feels unique to me. It still feels like it's doing something that other games aren't doing, and I still enjoy it. Do I want to play it every weekend? Probably not, but I don't know. I think it gets more fun for me every time I play it. So I like it. I like playing it with people that know how to play it, just getting in there, kind of figuring out this puzzle. The tension in this game was, again, it happened again. I was like set up for a pretty good, lots of things were going well. And then Chris just kept, every time I was setting myself up for a big area control victory, Chris would move in and just like stop what I was doing. Or he surprised me, came in with 3 mechs into a place where I had 2 mechs at one point. I was like, how do you even do that? Oh, okay. It's all that movement over there. And it's just exciting. The game has exciting moments. It has engine building moments. I like Scythe a lot. I will definitely be requesting to play it again whenever I can.
I will happily play this one. I don't know if I'll request it. The only thing that bugs me a bit about this game is I wish that the pace, I wish it started at like the second half of the game. I feel like the first half of the game is just a little slow to develop. I want to get that, those exciting moments where I can actually move my guys and move more than 3 guys here. And this game for me, maybe it was a little rough because I couldn't get any metal. I think Tim had blocked off the tunnel that had metal access, maybe intentionally, maybe not intentionally. And so it took me a while to get out. I couldn't get my mechs going. And I don't know, I was able to build stuff and I was able to make some wood and some wheat. That's about all I could do. So, and I feel like that's been typical for a lot of my plays of this game. The first 3, 4, 5 turns, there's not much going on. And then finally, like stars are flying out. There's some cool combats happening. Oh, now I've got 3 mechs going over here and my guys are spreading out in this region. I got this cool encounter and I just got 3 oil drums and upgrade this, upgrade that. And oh my gosh, what enlist? You guys did this. I get another $1 here. So stuff finally starts to get going at the back half of this game. And that's the part I really enjoy. And there's some fun moments. So I'm kind of of 2 minds. And I would play Tim's set anytime. He's got these metal mechs that are huge and amazingly crafted. But, I don't know if there's one going on in my fictional local game group. I don't know if I'm going to do it or I'm going to look probably for some other options first before I come back to this one. Oh, what about you, Chris?
I would definitely ask to play this one again. This is a great game. Specifically, I would actually like to play the Rise of Fenris campaign again, because I think that is tremendous fun. But even the base game, I think, is a lot of fun. To be honest, the one thing that I do find a little bit that I don't love about it, and this is the thing that's killed me both of these times that we played, it's the $1 equals a point. Part of that is some sour grapes from having lost 2 games based on the money thing. But in the context of this, it feels a little bit lame to me that you can do all these things, make all this stuff happen out on the board. And if someone turtles and collects a bunch of dollars, then, that can create a lot of. But, in the grand scheme of things, next time I'd probably go into it with a little bit more of a plan to, fight around that. But other than that, I think the game is great. I think I want to keep playing it. And just as an aside, for anybody who does like this game or tries it and thinks that they might want to play a different variation on it and has younger family members, I've mentioned this on the show before, but there is actually a family weight version of Scythe. It's called My Little Scythe, also published by Stonemaier Games, but designed by Hobie and Vienna Chow. Much more family friendly, both in terms of theme. It's got animals and friendship, and you throw apples at each other instead of fighting wars. But
pie fights.
What's that? Pie? Yes, sorry, pie fights, not apples. But it's a delightful game. It definitely gives you some of the same feels as Scythe, and it does it in a very fun, kid-friendly way. And it also has a surprisingly impressive production for a family weight game. So definitely something to look at if that sounds like it would be of interest to you.
I do know that Chris mentioned that next time he will pay attention to the money, but I know that next time he will just do his best to attack me again, and we'll forget all about the money the next time we play. So
see, that's the problem. It's like in no game out there, usually it's like every 5 coins is like worth half a point or some silly thing like that, and then it always catches me by surprise. It won't next time.
Yeah. Well, this is not an advertisement at all, but just in case you're interested, there is a follow-up to Scythe coming out set in the same world, and I'm excited because, like I said, I love the artwork, and it looks like Jakub Brzezowski's done it again with this, set in the same universe, and this is called Encounters. It's coming out soon from Stonemaier Games. I'm looking forward to playing it. We'll see how it plays. Maybe we'll review it on the show at some point, but worth paying attention to, I think, for the artwork alone. All right, let's jump into some games that have been on our table right after this. All right, welcome back. Chris, what have you been playing this week?
A few weeks back, I finally got my copy of a Kickstarter game that I've been waiting on for some time, and I was quite excited to get. It's called Steam Up, A Feast of Dim Sum. It's designed by Pauline Kong, Marie Wong, and Heyman Lee, and is published by Hot Banana Games. It is a game based on the concept of dim sum. You know what the funny thing is? I've never actually had dim sum. I want to try it now after playing this game, but it is a Chinese delicacy, which is, as I understand it, beloved by anybody who's ever tried it. But you get these little steamers with different types of buns and all kinds of interesting things, including, as I understand it, some like chicken feet, that scares me a little bit. But the designers wanted to share a part of their culture that they find so delightful, and they thought would make a good game out of it. And I think they actually succeeded quite a bit. So Steam Up is played around a central board that has a rotating Lazy Susan that has these stacked steamers on them. And each steamer has certain types of dim sum inside of them. And then each player has a unique character and a card that they're trying to fill in to get points. The characters are just super fun to begin with. Each one has an asymmetric power. They're based on the signs of the Chinese zodiac calendar, and they each have a little story and a little mechanism, such as being able to. There's a magician. My son, when we played the bunny, who's a magician, and he can change one kind of dim sum to another kind of dim sum. And there's another one. There's a pig called the food blogger who gets to do some funny thing. But these delightful, adorable cards with interesting little powers. And what you do each turn is you have the ability to do one of a couple things. You can take dim sum out of the steamer. You can play a special action card. You can rotate the steamers and get the steamer into your zone, because you can only take dim sum out of the steamers if the steamer is actually in your what they call your feast zone. Pretty simple mechanisms. It's moving the steamers around, getting them in the right place, being able to take the dim sum out of the steamers, placing them on your board, scoring the points according to where you put those dim sum. You're filling in the card, and as you add more dim sum, you get more points. And in the end, the player that has the most points is going to be the winner of the game. Now, that may sound extremely simple, and it is extremely simple. This is not going to be a hardcore game for hardcore gamers as the centerpiece of a game night, but I will say this. It is a delightful family weight game, simple to learn. It took me about 5 minutes to teach this to my wife and my 11-year-old, and we had a really nice time with it. It's also super easy and quick to set up, which is really nice, particularly considering the production. And all the nice little pieces. It takes about 5 minutes, 10 minutes maybe to set up, and it could be a pleasant little palate cleanser during a regular game night if you're playing some bigger, heavier games. And I think the game lasted us, on first play, this is, by the way, about half an hour, maybe 45 minutes at most. And the production version I played with was the Kickstarter exclusive, the deluxe version, which probably makes quite a bit of a difference, because they have these nice little steamers, but you have the little plastic pieces of dim sum that actually look and feel just like, the real thing. They're molded plastic. as opposed to the cardboard chits that you would have in the standard version. I will say that the upgraded version is an amazing, pleasant experience to play with. It might be slightly less so with the chits. But overall, my comment on this game is it is a lot of fun if that's the kind of weight you're looking for in a game. Say if you have a family member, young family members, or you like simpler games, lighter weight games, or if you want to have something around that you could throw in for a palate cleanser on a big game night. We played my wife and my son and I. My son and I had a really good time. My wife was not super thrilled with it, but she also doesn't particularly like this weight of game. So she likes either something completely brainless like, Monopoly or Sorry, or something incredibly deep and thinky like Terraforming Mars or Barrage. So it wasn't her style. She didn't love it. My son and I both had a great time. Again, not the kind of thing I'd bust out for a main event of a game night, but it's one that I like having around. It's also one that I could pull out if I had friends over who I wanted to give some of that, real hobby game experience without getting into a super heavy game, and one that I could teach very quickly in just a few minutes. And just looking at this thing, look at a picture online. It's a fun table presence.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Rachel prefers Monopoly over Steam Up. No, I'm just kidding. Chris, I actually have a question for you on this. The production looks amazing on this, but it does sound like a little lighter than I'm probably looking for in a game. But this sounds really similar to Facilis to me. It sounds like similar because of the production. It sounds similar mechanisms, kind of order fulfillment to collect points, situational awareness of where things are in order to trigger these things. This seems very similar to Facilis in a number of ways. Chris, if you had to pick one of these two, do you think Steam Up beats Facilis? Do you think that you would pick that? Do you see a reason why you would have both of these in your collection? Are they different enough?
That's a really good question, Tim. They are very different. A couple points of comparison, and I would say that if this is a weight of game that you enjoy, these both would have a place in the collection. They feel very different to me. Steam Up is a much lighter game.
Okay.
Facilis takes a while to set up. There's that is not a small undertaking, getting that game set up. And it, like Steam Up, it has a great production, but it takes a little bit of time to get that out on the table. And it takes a fair amount of thinking to get it taught. You have to do some explanation. It takes there's a little bit of rules overhead to it. I felt like Steam Up was a much lighter rule set. And it was different also in that Steam Up and Facilis is largely order fulfillment. You're getting the right bones in order to build out these dinosaur skeletons. The mechanism for scoring in Steam Up felt different. It wasn't exactly order fulfillment. You weren't trying to accomplish certain combos to get the right cards or anything like that. You basically have a big sheet that you're trying to fill in, which is, I guess, a variation on order fulfillment, but it didn't feel like that to me. Order fulfillment is not one of my favorite things. I know it's not one of yours either. And this didn't feel like that to me, whereas Facilis does more. And so I wouldn't compare these two very much in terms of the actual gameplay, but I would say that they fall in that same kind of category of weight. Both are fun.
Now, Chris, you mentioned setup. How do you set this thing up? How do you get the little pieces in there? You just kind of sprinkle them in. How do you make sure it's random distribution? How does that all work?
You basically you manual randomization. You lay out the steamers, and then you place, there's a certain number that goes in each one. So you just make a point of drawing them out of the bag and placing them randomly. Pretty simple.
All right, cool. Well, thanks, Chris. So the game I've had on my table this week and the last few weeks is Frosthaven. This is by Idric Childress and Cephalofair Games. I'm not going to go into too much detail on the game description here, but I do have a lot to say about it. And I'm not going to go too deep because I suspect that almost everybody here has either played some version of Frosthaven, Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, or they at least have a good understanding of the rules. But I'm going to give just a really quick overview. This is essentially a tactical cooperative dungeon crawler game. It is cooperative, but basically you're going to play 2 to 4 players, and every game is going to start with a scenario setup where you're going to basically lay out a map and then put monsters in the scenario, and then your heroes are going to start at one point. They're going to have an objective, and they're going to be trying to move around the map, probably beat up monsters, pick up treasures. So that's the kind of the general theme of it. The way this works, though, is a pretty clever planning mechanism where everybody starts with a hand of cards. The characters we played with so far have 12 cards. So at the start of the game, you start with 12 cards. And as your character gets upgraded, you're going to be able to swap these cards out and get more powerful cards. But at the start of the game, you have 15 cards to choose from. You pick 12 of them. This is your hand of cards. On your turn, or on everybody's turn, you're going to reveal at the same time 2 cards. And the cards are basically laid out with a top action and a bottom action. So, for an example, the top action might say deal 3 melee damage, and the bottom action might say move 2 and heal 1 on 1 card. So, I would pick 2 different cards, and I would pick which top action I'm going to use and which bottom action I'm going to use. I'm going to lay them face down. Once everybody's picked their cards, you flip them over, and in the middle of these cards is an initiative number. And so whoever picks the lowest initiative number on their card is going to go first, second, etc. And after the characters have revealed their cards, you also, for any monsters that are in the room with you, you're going to flip over. Each monster type has a unique deck of cards. You're going to flip over the top card of their deck, and it's going to show an initiative number. So it's going to show who's going to move first and do their actions, who's going to move second, etc. And so you're going to be moving around this dungeon with your move actions, trying to attack monsters. But there's a little bit of a surprise element. It is cooperative, but you can't really quarterback it because you can't see what everyone else is doing. You're not allowed to specifically say exactly what you're going to do before you reveal your cards. You have to say something like, I'm going to go pretty quick and going to try to get over to this part of the room. Or I'm going to go really slow, but I'm hoping to heal myself when I get done with my action or something like that. But you need to be kind of generic about it. And you never know what the monsters are going to do this. So they surprise you all the time. You might like go super fast and then blow your initiative. And then they're all going at 65 or 80 or whatever. It's usually a number out of 100 to 99. So that's a really, really simple overview of how this game works. Wow, this game has got a lot going on. So a little background, the game came shipped from Kickstarter, and it is the largest box I've ever seen, largest game board box I've ever seen. It's, I don't know, a good 2 feet long by 18 inches tall by 18 inches wide or something like that. And in this box, it's just full of content. It's got probably 60 different monster types, which include a standee, a unique deck of cards, an initiative chip. It's got just 1,000 different cards that the heroes can discover in different ways. So there's just a ton of content in here. So my question when I got this was, am I going to get this played? Is it going to be fun for me? And I had a friend I recently introduced to board games. I kind of told him about it, and he's like, yeah, I really want to try that out. So when we did a game night and it was only the 2 of us showing up, he's like, let's try Frosthaven. And so we busted it out. And the answer is yes, it's pretty fun. We're having a really good time going through it. What it's got going for it is a really incredible world that's been built here. Obviously, like I said, there's a lot of content, but the world that you're exploring is going to kind of play out in a different way than probably anyone else is going to experience it. A couple examples, like the first time you go into a scenario, the scenario tells you how the map's laid out, who's in there, but it's also going to tell you what the treasure deck looks like in that scenario. And it's going to be like, there'll be like 4 treasure cards, 3 pieces of wood, 2 roots of this type, and a random treasure chest, as well as like 3 pieces of leather. So you shuffle that up. And the way you would pick up a treasure or a loot is after a monster dies, they drop a loot package. And if you end your turn on that, or if you use a loot action, you pick that up and you pull a card off the top of the deck. So you're going to be picking up these random things, and maybe it's a couple coins. Maybe it's an herb that you can later transform into a potion. Maybe it's some leather that you can later transform into a piece of armor. But it also could be a unique item, and that's the only way you're going to get these items. And there's a pack of about 100 item cards that if you manage to get that treasure chest in that scenario, you'll get to randomly choose one of these item cards out of this deck. My suspicion is that we'll probably finish this if we ever finish this campaign, we'd encounter like 15 of those random item cards, and there's like 65 that we'll never see. And that's kind of how the content is in this game. I'm going to give a little bit of a spoiler here. So like the 4th scenario or something like that we played through, we ran into a scenario where we encountered 2 big monsters in a room. And let me go back a second, right? So we started with 2 characters to start with, right? We picked 2 out of the 5 or 6 that are available to choose from. And you don't know much about it. They just kind of give you a little description of what type of characters these are. So we picked 2 characters. They all have unique decks. They have unique miniatures. They have, kind of their own abilities that are going to trigger and stuff like that. They're different life points. So we are playing 2 out of the 6. The way this game plays is you don't play through a scenario with 1 character. You play it until you meet a certain objective. And once you meet that objective, you retire that character. It builds a building into your city, which I'll get to. And then you get to start with a new character, completely new character. And so there is like 20 different characters in this box. And they all have their own boxes, their own minis and everything like that. So we get to this one encounter and we're playing against these two boss monsters. And the condition for the boss monster is that you have to beat one of them. Again, spoilers here. If you want to play this, play this game and be totally surprised, fast forward like 30 seconds or so. So we beat one of the boss monsters, and the story has us read a different element, and it says, okay, this other boss monster is now a playable character that you can use later when you retire one of yours. The other character, which has a mini, which has its own monster pack and everything, I don't think you will ever play it. I think the game, it's just like, that's content that is in this box that will never be played. And the box is just full of that. Branching paths, stories that you can never play. At one point, we made a choice about which scenario we wanted to go to. The other one, cross it off. You can never go back and play that one again. So it's a very unique experience, a very open world, lots of different paths to go down, lots of adventures to go on. Every story is unique. Every scenario is very unique, even though you're kind of doing the same thing of this tactical combat. The monsters' abilities are different. The story, the goals that you're going to do in these stories are going to be unique. There is a lot of variety. We've played 9 different scenarios at this point. We did a 9-hour session this last Sunday. Played 5 scenarios in a row. They're about 2 to 2.5 hour sessions generally. And so we're 9 sessions in, and everyone feels like a different adventure, a different thing to explore. And we're playing with the same starting characters. Eventually, we'll retire those and we'll get to do some new characters. One last step here. So after you do an adventure, then you can go back and do the city phase where you go back to the city of Frosthaven, and you can upgrade your character if you've got enough experience points. You can buy things at a store. You can craft potions. You have to do this event card that happens, and it could be somebody attacking your city that you got to fend off, or some other event that happens. There's just so much content, so much variety in this game, so many fun things that happen. It's great. Here's the drawback. So this rule book is like 45 pages. It's really well laid out, beautifully illustrated, well laid out. There's a Paul Grogan video series, you can go watch it. He'll tell you how to play. So I did that, and then I read this 45-page rule book. It all made perfect sense. It's laid out wonderfully. But there are so many rules in this game that there has not been a single scenario where I don't have to go searching through the rule book at least 3 or 4 times. And we're 9 sessions in at this point, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. It's not that the rules aren't clearly presented, but there are so many rules and so many unique situations that they happen in. You have to be prepared for that. This beautiful rule book is more worn than any rule book I have in my collection after 9 sessions, because I've been searching through it so many times. It's laid out really nicely. It's really easy to learn the game from. And there's a good index in the back. But if you look at the index to say, like, how does polling work? Well, there's 15 different pages referenced where poll was pulled up in the rule book. There's a 2-page layout where it tells you how different types of obstacles that are going to be placed in a room when you set up the scenario are. And you have to go back and look and say, like, well, wait a second, if it's a small obstacle, can I jump over it? Yeah, but if it's a big obstacle, does it block a ranged attack? Oh, no, I guess it doesn't. So it's that type of detail that is so thematic in here that just takes a lot to, like, I can never remember for sure. And we want to play it right. And I'm sure we probably cheated like 15 times because we just can't keep track of every single rule, but we're trying. So all that said, if you don't mind doing that, if you want an epic adventure that has legacy elements where you're going to go down certain paths and just like basically cross off pages in your rule book and you'll never use them again. If you want to get like unlock treasure that's going to be this exciting object, but if you miss that in a scenario, you'll never get to go back to it and see it again. If you want to place stickers on your character sheet because you've done some unique unlock that is going to change your character forever, but eventually you're going to retire this character and you'll never get to play with it again. You got to start with a new character from scratch. It's just this huge open world. It's so ambitious and it's so fun, but it's so heavy and it's so much work to play. There's a trade-off there. I'm really excited about going back to it for now. I don't know how long that's going to last. I feel like at this point, like, we played five scenarios the other day. We finished our 4th one and my friend was like, I got time for one more. Can we do one more? We'll get this final boss battle. And I almost said, no, I don't want to do another scenario today. But we did it and it was fun. It was fun to get that done with. So now we're kind of finished that little storyline. We can start a new one when we get together again. But it's a lot. There's a lot here. If you got the group that's going to come back to it repeatedly, if you got the time and the the energy to put into it, awesome. If you don't, it's a lot going on here. What do you guys think of Frosthaven? Does this get you excited? Are you interested in it? What do you think?
I am so hesitant with this one. I have the box. I ordered the Kickstarter. It's sitting right here at the bottom of my board game shelf, just anchoring it to the floor. I don't think I'll ever get this one played, to be quite honest with you, Tim. The amount that it asks from the player and the amount of time I have available to, spend with a giant board game. I wish I had, hours and hours of time to hang out and just sit here thoughtfully and stroll through this rule book and play with all these characters and organize all this stuff. But I don't think I have that kind of time, to be honest with you. Beyond that, I don't know if it sounds fun to me. It seems grindy. Maybe you can touch on this after I'm done talking. It seems a little grindy to me. It seems repetitive. What keeps you going back? Is it the upgrade? What gives you those little hits that say, oh man, this was cool. I'm really glad I did this. I want to keep going back and back and back. It sounded like you might see yourself putting a pause on this. Also, you paused after you did the 5 scenarios, whatever it was the other day. Do you put all this stuff back in the box? Do you leave it set up? How is that handled?
I'll start with what's unique about it. First of all, the gameplay is actually fun. The decisions you're making, it is the repetitive tactical situation, but the decisions are fun. The scenarios that happen are fun. As you upgrade your character, it's exciting. My friend's playing this character called, I forget the name of it, but basically he raises creatures from the dead. So he's not super powerful or anything. He's got a weak hit points, but different cards can actually add monsters. They call them summons in this game. So you can add these summons to the board. And at first it was like he adds a couple skeletons that are moving around and they die pretty quickly. But, he's got these creatures running around. And then he got this wraith that can move around and do range damage. And so that was really cool. And then he gets this big, beefy zombie that comes out there. So it's just like fun things that you're unlocking and discovering as this game goes on. And as you play through more scenarios that do change the situation and the grindiness of it. So, things do change. The scenarios, though, the story in this, right? The world building is great. When you start a scenario, it is a good, full, large 8x11 page of story, 2-column double space story that you're reading. And so you have to go in wanting to do that, but it is telling a story. It's building this world around it. So it is kind of about you're playing a story, and it does it really well. Each scenario plays out very different, and that's really important. I think if every scenario was go into this room and beat up 5 guys, that would suck. But what happens is almost every scenario you set up, and it's you lay out 3 map tiles, but each of them has a closed door between them. So it only shows you what the first room is, right? Because thematically you're walking into this room and you see this stuff, and there might be some obstacles laid out, and you're going to go and whatever the goal of the story is. It might be to escape, to get through the whole scenario and not die. It might be to kill everybody in the room. It might be to go and trigger this one object in the room. But you deal with that first room, and then you go into the room in the next one, and then you flip to another page in the book and it tells you how to lay that out. So you're kind of throughout this scenario exploring and encountering different things. And oftentimes there's a special treasure chest at the end, but it's also where the toughest monsters are. So if you can survive, you're racing to try to get to that treasure chest before your deck runs out of cards. By the way, this is a little bit of a hand management thing, where every time you use all your cards, if you need to take them back, you're going to have to scrap a card. And there are other ways to do that. But if you ever run out of cards, then you're done. You're knocked out. Also, if you take damage, you've got life. But if you take damage, you can scrap a card. And so sometimes you have to do that. So it always gets very tense. These scenarios, you get towards the end and it's we might not survive this. Usually it's on the last turn. So they feel really well balanced, where everyone feels hard to do, but unique objectives, unique story, unique monsters. So that's all awesome. That's what keeps us coming back. You asked about the setup. It's terrible. It's so much work. It's so many things you have to dig through to get this scenario set up. So I try to get it set up before we even get together. But when we played 5 scenarios in a day, we spent a good 20 minutes between each scenario, kind of marking off all the stuff we got from the last scenario and then setting up this new scenario. So the game is a lot of work. This is not something you're going to do casually. This is not something you're going to do, just hey, I got 30 minutes. Let's sit down and do something. This is something where you have to be committed for at least 2.5 hours to get through one of these. And you don't really want to just do one session, because if you do, that means you're spending a good 45 minutes setting it up and then putting it away at the end. So yeah, that hopefully that answers your questions. I don't know if I missed any in there.
I think that covers it. Yeah.
So Tim, question for you. Big production on this one. Looks like a pretty epic table presence and lots and lots and lots of big plastic figures. Is it used to good effect here, or do you feel like the production was mostly done to entice people on Kickstarter?
No, the funny thing is, Chris, like the plastic figures, the only plastic figures you get in this box are the character figures, which means you only have enough out. But there's a lot because you can unlock like 20 different characters.
Oh, I see. Because I was looking at the pictures on BGG, and I'm just thinking these plethora of figures.
I think there's a lot of people that did like 3D printed stuff and upgraded components, but no, most of the, in fact, it's almost a little bit of a complaint that for how epic of a story this is and how big of a box this is, the minis are great, but the rest of the production is okay. Like the board tiles that you're laying out, and there's like 30 different double-sided tiles that you might have to lay out for a scenario. There are hex grids with very minimal artwork on them. So comparing that to like Cthulhu Death May Die, which has these beautiful illustrated rooms that you're moving through.
Yeah.
These are mostly like one big snow surface with maybe a little bit of bones and some blood in the background, in the back corner or something like that. So not too exciting there. There's like a huge tray full of obstacle type of chips that you have to lay out every scenario. And they're not very, it's like a 2D, here's a log that goes across these two hexes, or here's here's a rock that you put here. And they're hard to distinguish from each other. And they're so flat on the surface that they're hard to, like, you can see them, but they're not super exciting. And the thing is like still this huge box is packed and it's all content. And that's what I think is the payoff here. It's like the production is fine. It's serviceable. It works okay. But I don't think you'd get excited by the production at all. The monsters are all standees, which you get over pretty quickly. But, like when you're comparing your player minis to these standees walking around there, but they're nice artwork. Like the artwork's all cool fantasy artwork. And again, unique characters. These are not just like ogres and dwarfs and dragons. It's like all unique types of monsters that they give you backstory on. And it's kind of unique to this world. So, production is a lot of cardboard, but I mean, in this box, it was like 30 different punch boards. And they're pretty thick, it's nice enough, but it's 30 punch boards of cardboard. They do have nice trays that assist about as much as you could expect, but it's not enough to really, make it easy. Apparently much better than Gloomhaven, which I never played, the trays in the box, but still a lot of setup there.
Well, Frosthaven got you to say loot package, and that makes it a winner in my book.
That's this episode, huh? That's where we're going.
That's the quote of the episode. Dropping the loot package. I just about dropped a loot package and you said that.
Well, I've had a game on the table. I'm gonna save it, I think, for next time. The episode's getting a little long. But Scythe Gonzalez, who, if you're listening, if you don't know Seth, he is a big time supporter of the show. Oftentimes contributor, response to the polls or just general comments, and occasionally movie posters, which I heard Terraforming Mars, the movie rights have been bought and they're actually going to make a movie now.
That's right.
That's pretty funny.
No, it's Gaia It was Gaia Project. Well,
I think there's a bunch of them out there. Yeah.
Oh, both Terraforming Mars as well. That's right.
Anyway, Assault on Cable 54. I plan on doing a sort of, 4 or 5 part mini series specifically for Seth Gonzalez since he requested this. It's on my table now. I've taken a few turns. I have some things to say about it. This will just be the preamble or the pilot teaser number 1. I'm having a lot of fun with it so far. It's you have to play 4 characters. There's a hidden trader element or hidden role element to this game, which I think is neat. The production is a mishmash. I'm gonna have some thoughts about that. But the star of the show is these pink bubblegum looking dice, which say chew bubblegum or kick ass. And you have a 1 out of 3 probability of kicking ass. The other times you're just going to chew gum and not get anything done. Anyway, I'm having fun with it so far. Seth, a great sense of humor in this game and some interesting mechanisms. I think there's a lot that this game has to offer, and I'm looking forward to digging into it more. So I will be reporting more as I have more to report about They Live Assault on Cable 54.
Adam, isn't it fair to say the real star of this show is Rowdy Roddy Piper? Come on.
Absolutely. For Rowdy Roddy Piper, go back and look at the movie for this thing. You've probably seen these aliens trying to invade Earth and take over the planet. And the only way you can detect them is with these sunglasses, which are in the game. And there's some element of putting on these sunglasses and inspecting the different characters that you encounter and seeing if they're actually human or an alien. And the only way to reveal it is with these sunglasses. So that's kind of cool right there.
Love it.
Well, I have still never seen this game, but I actually, it reminds me, I think I'm going to go and try to get it watched before you give us your review on it, so I can have some commentary to go along with it. So excited to check that one out.
Fantastic, Tim. You'll have a great time watching this flick. It's pretty good. They also have released another Kickstarter with the same system in the same They Live universe. And I don't know if it's just a different aspect of the movie or if they made a whole series of these movies. I don't know what's going on exactly, but now I'm going to have to do some research and maybe Seth can tell us what's going on.
Nice.
We should probably try doing some of that research before we record the episodes and not after at some point.
That doesn't make any sense, Tim.
We'll be the fun in that.
All right, cool. Well, I think that'll wrap up this week's episode. Next week comes a special episode and then probably our SedonaCon coverage after that. So something to look forward to. Thank you all for joining us. If you like the show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. You can follow us on Twitter at BG_Hot Takes and on our Board Game Hot Takes group on Facebook. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Next week when we drop another loot package on you. Good night, all.
Bye-bye.
What the you know, I'm just going to leave it. Adam, do you have anything to say?